Imagine your WinForms app looking like a Star Trek control panel. Glowing particles drifting across the screen, leaving neon trails behind them. In this video, we'll build exactly that, a holographic particle system. And don't worry, I'll guide you step by step so every line of code makes sense. Let's jump right in. We'll start by creating a class called holo particles. Think of it as a blueprint for a single particle. Each particle knows its position, its size, how fast it moves, and even its color. Together, hundreds of these little dots will create our glowing field. Let's code first and then I will explain what we have and how it works. And don't worry, it's easier than you think. X and Y are the particle's coordinates, basically, where it is on the screen. Size decides how big the dot looks. Tiny dots feel like dust, larger ones like glowing bubbles. Speed tells us how quickly it moves. Some will drift lazily, others zoom a bit faster. And color? That's where the magic glow comes from. We'll lock it to a neon cyan tone, because that screams futuristic. Of course, if every particle looked the same, it would be boring. That's why we bring in a random generator. Each particle is born in a random spot, with a random size, speed, and even a slightly different transparency. This little bit of chaos is what makes the scene feel alive. Sometimes they float upward, sometimes downward. That's decided by underscore direction, randomly set to 1 or -1. So some dots rise, others fall, like sparks drifting in the air. A particle alone is just a glowing dot. But we want that holographic trailing effect. For that, each particle remembers its past positions in an array called underscore trailing. Think of it like footprints in the snow. Each frame, the newest position goes at the front, and the oldest one gets pushed back. That way, when we draw it, we can place a series of tiny dots behind the particle, fading away into the distance, giving it that smooth neon tail. In the update method, we actually move the particle. Each tick, its Y position changes by its speed and direction. If it drifts off the top of the screen, it reappears at the bottom, like a wraparound tunnel. Same if it goes below. That means our holographic field never runs out of particles, they recycle infinitely. Now for the fun part, drawing. For every point in the trail, we calculate an alpha value, basically, how transparent it should be. The closer it is to the head of the particle, the brighter it glows. The farther back, the more it fades out. This creates that smooth glowing fade, like a comet streaking through the night sky. Then we use fill ellipse to paint a tiny circle for each point, put them together, and you get a shimmering holographic effect, like data streams flowing across your UI. Alright, now let's put it into a form. To get the stuff working we need some more code. So let's walk on it. I will explain it later. We create a list of particles, update them on a timer, and paint them in on Paint. As a first step we can modify the form a lit regarding background, title and size. After that we can check the settings and modify if needed. So I think it looks good. Now let's code the missing part. First we add particles. Here we're creating our particle swarm. The loop runs from 0 up to the number we defined as particle count. Each round it spawns a brand new particle. Notice how we pass in the forms width and height, client size. Width and client size. Height, this tells each particle, hey, your playground is as big as the whole window. After creating it, we drop the particle into our underscore particles list. Think of this list as a container that remembers every glowing particle we generate. Later, when we want to draw them, we simply ask the list to give us each one back. This is where the magic actually shows up on screen. We override the onPaint method, that's basically the canvas refresh event of our form. Every time Windows says hey, your window needs to be redrawn, this code runs. First, we grab the graphics object from the event. Think of graphics as our digital paintbrush. Then we enable anti-alias, which smooths out edges so our particles don't look pixelated but instead nice and silky. Now comes the fun part, we loop over every particle in our underscore particles list and tell each one to draw itself. The particle knows how to render its own glow and trail, so we just give it the paintbrush. Finally, we call base on paint E to let the default painting happen as well, that keeps our form behaving normally while still showing the custom visuals. One little tip, base on paint should actually go outside the loop, otherwise it gets called over and over again, once per particle. That's not really necessary, and it can cause flickering. So I recommend moving it to the very end of the method if you have bigger projects like this. And there we are. We see our particles on the screen. But where is the movement? Let's fix that. Now that we have our particles drawn, we need to bring them to life. And the easiest way to do that in WinForms is by using a timer. So, here's what's happening. We're creating a new timer object called _anim. The interval is set to 16 milliseconds, which is just about 60 frames per second. That's basically the same refresh rate your monitor runs at, so our animation feels smooth and fluid. Next, we connect the timer's tick event to our custom method _anim_tick. Think of this like saying, hey timer, every time you tick, call this method. And then finally, _anim. Start kicks everything into motion. Then we loop through all our particles and call pUpdate. This lets each particle recalculate its position, velocity, or any effect we want. So if a particle drifts off the screen, this update method will handle bouncing it back or respawning it. And finally, invalidate. This tells the form, hey, it's time to repaint everything. Which then calls our onPaint method again, so the screen constantly refreshes with new particle positions. The result? A smooth, living particle effect that looks like futuristic holo particles dancing on your screen. This timer tick invalidate cycle is the beating heart of almost every 2D animation in WinForms. Once you get this loop down, you can animate anything, from bouncing balls to glowing UI elements. Don't forget to set double buffered equals true. Without it, the particles would flicker like crazy. With it, the animation looks clean and silky. That is really cool, or? It is also easy to modify with the counter variable. So try and play a little with this. As an add-on we can add some scan lines to the form. That looks even more future style. Just some lines of code are needed. I will explain it later. First, we adjust a variable called _scan, offset. Imagine this as a little scanning beam that moves across the screen, kind of like the glowing sweep on a radar or the shimmer in a hologram. Every tick, we add 0.5 to it. Once it gets too big, we reset it back to 0. Here we create a pen. Think of the pen as our digital marker, it defines how our lines will look. Here I'm using a semi-transparent cyan color. The 30 here is the alpha channel, which controls transparency. That means our lines will glow faintly, not too harsh. The second parameter 1 sets the pen width, just 1 pixel, nice and thin. Now comes the loop. This says, start at whatever _scan offset is, that's the shifting offset we animate in the timer. Keep going down the screen until we reach the bottom, client size. Height. Every 12 pixels, draw another line. Inside the loop we call, draw, line. This draws a horizontal line all the way across the screen, starting at the left edge, 0, y, and ending at the right edge, client size. Width, y. When the _scan offset is updated frame by frame, the whole grid of lines shifts smoothly downward, giving the illusion of a scanner beam sweeping the display, just like you'd see on a futuristic radar or Star Trek panel. And because of the transparency, the lines softly blend with the particles behind them, so it doesn't feel like a rigid grid, more like a subtle holographic overlay. Want to make it your own? Here are some quick tweaks. Change the RGB values to get different holographic vibes, magenta, lime, or deep blue. Increase the trail length for long, flowing tails. Add X movement, and your particles will drift diagonally like they're floating in zero gravity. Or draw bigger, blurrier circles for a glowing halo effect. And that's it. With just one class and a timer, we've turned a plain WinForms form into a glowing, holographic display. If you enjoyed this effect, hit that like button, subscribe for more futuristic WinForms tricks, and let me know in the comments what effect you'd like me to tackle next. Maybe a cool neon holo button that fits to your form like this. Just let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and keep coding and have fun.